Hi, folks. Nick Tockert here with the Historical Fencing Guild. One moment, please. There we go. Before we get into it, let's talk about our who makes this possible. First and foremost, we need to push out to our good friends over at the Independent Creator Directory. That's IndieCD.org. That is not the right. Here we go. Your one-stop shop for the best and the brightest authors, artists, and musicians. We are also made possible by sales of the Simple Sword, the Fighting Axe, and the Simple Spear, all part of my ongoing series of Western martial arts manuals designed to help you go from having never handled the sword to teaching the art to others. And, of course, we are made possible by my amazing, incredible patrons. That's Frog G, Off in the Woods, Frog G, Off in the Woods, Brian K. Morris, Cindy Kep, Don Dulos. I'm trying to catch them all in order, and we just had some changes. So, Steve Augusta and oh no. 1 second, folks. Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. I will reintroduce you guys later. You'll notice I'm a couple minutes late. I had to fight some fun with an unexpected computer update that decided to auto reboot for me. Yay. But we do have some benefits of plans today. We have schemes. I just have to find some of the stuff because I had help in my study cleaning, which means some of my stuff went on walkabout, which means I have to find it. And I thought it was there. But other stuff I was looking for, including my lovely rubber mallet and an ancient but well-loved ball-beamed hammer, did appear. So we should be able to get that whole ball rolling. But before we get into that, I'm going to get into the comments, see if there are any questions, anything people need to discuss. If possible, I may do some leather work. If the conversation goes for it, we will keep going, and we'll see how today's going. Like I said, I am kind of hitting the ball running because some days things just don't work right. And if you ever see me start on a computer day with a can of WD-40 in my hand, you know it has not been working right. We will see who's in the chat, and we'll go from there. Glasses. Now, groovy. Trey comes skidding in. Hey, y'all. Hi, Trey. And Thesis says, was starting to get worried. Honestly, me too. The computer decided it was going to do a reboot, and then StreamYard was playing it. But you don't have a camera and microphone. And I was arguing with it. So this is a little bit of the new normal while I deal with whatever's going on there. And the shifting in the background means things get relocated. It is going to be a song and dance. On the plus side, I may get to use my backup rivet center. So we will see. I was just double checking to make sure it wasn't being posted on the other channel. Honestly, so was I. It was supposed to be set up. I thought I had set it up, and I apparently didn't, or there was an error. I'm running into one of those, and that's okay. And happy Friday, Cindy. I will try not to hog the chat with questions today. If you have valid questions, that's what we're here for. This show was set up originally in 2020, okay? Which means I've been doing this for 5 years now, roughly. This show, as a way to reach out and communicate with the Historical Fencing Guild when, illness and other things were keeping us at bay. C words that would get me demonetized and bothered. We are here literally to answer questions. It evolved into a show where people can ask about swords. We can talk about requested items, and we can answer them together. I can give advice. That's literally why the Historical Fencing Guild exists, Ruby. So please, from the bottom of my heart, both of them, do not hesitate to ask questions. And like I said, if I need to do a pre-record, I'll do a pre-record. Did I have some issues this week? Yes. That's part of streaming. That's part of adapting, and that's part of what we're all about. And Cindy says, get some simple swords to use against the big stompy robots who use simple spears and battle Hanson Hellfire. Thank you, dear. You can find all my books on Amazon. Hey, Thesis, Cindy, Ruby, and Nick. Waves. Yep, I'm having one of those. Check out some cool art on deviantart.com/NickT. Thank you. And why am I the only one who has hit the like button? For shame. LOL. Some people are hesitant. They want to make sure I'm here and everything works. Tune into the Historical Fencing Guild tonight at 7 for this episode, which is a very falling apart episode, but we are making it go. Be right back. I need to grab a bit of food. And hey, Sarah. And support the Historical Fencing Guild at patreon.com/the Historical Fencing Guild. And we got greetings, and we've got links for this. Tomorrow is the end of the seminar to learn double saber versus spear form. Should be interesting. I am fascinated to hear and see anything you're willing to share with us. Good luck, Cindy. I know you'll do well. And thanks. And no, wait, Trelana told me to try something. Thank you for having patience with me while I am still learning. Yes, excellent. And I will continue to have patience with you because we are all still learning. If somebody claims to know everything, but and puffs up very much, they aren't the kind of person you want to learn for. If you are not still a student of the art to an extent, if you are not still devoted to it, then you stagnate. So it's very important because when a student asks questions, I get to learn more from them. And I am very, very excited to learn more from them. Let's see. So mac and cheese for dinner. Rock on. That's a much better way to look at things, Ruby. Yes. And like I said, please. I had mac and cheese for lunch today. Slept straight through NTF, but got caught up. I'm just glad you slept, Sarah. I know you have problems with that. Grilled cheese. Ooh. 'Tis the evening for cheese. I'll never not be a student. If we stop learning, we die. So ask questions. Thesis likes the way I make them. I should hope so. Now, we do have a couple things to talk about. On one hand, I did successfully make contact with the individual who made the small sword I was looking at, and I can probably bring up some images that were sent to me of how he made them. They're beautiful, and his pricing is reasonable for what he is doing, but more expensive than I can swing right now because I need to save up for a couple fairly big tickets for me. Being a hello, Denny's. Maldonado? If I said that right, I hope so. Hello. Now, that being said, I can try to see if I can get his stuff to come up. So what I will do is hit this, move tab to new window, and we'll move this over. The cup hilt small sword that I shared on Reddit. Yes, You found it about the same time I did, I think. Oh wait, no, you found it. Yes. Uh, I'm sorry. I've been tracking down different swords for a few other people, so it is kind of a thing. Let me go through my assorted uh, comments. I don't use my uh, see, oh, my Reddit often, but I do want to see. Oh, I got a bunch of comments on. I want to check on the the gentleman who is doing that. So I'm going to go to his. Uh, there we go. I'm going to go here and quickly ignore. Aha. Here we go. So I'm going to present this so you guys can see it, because when people get excited, I get excited. So I will just do this, add this to the stage. This would be the rigging that was discussed. This is from OSA, also known as ENXEEXE. This right here, my dyslexia is getting me. But I have been after basically this particular weapon for 20 years. When you see how small it is, it's a very distinct, very deep bell or cup, depending on who you're talking to. People have a lot of terms for a lot of things that mean the same stuff. That allows for remarkable hand protection. You can actually get 2 fingers up under the guard. I don't know the point of balance on it, but he was kind enough to send the files. Oh, X. Now, see, that is a great question. The difference between a small sword and a rapier. All right. A small sword, okay, both the rapier and the small sword are primarily thrust-based civilian defensive weapons. Now, they did not develop in a straight line from each other. The rapier did not, but they kind of they ran parallel for quite a while. Okay, what happened was the same process we see with modern American firearms carry. When you think of firearms, especially from the 30s and 40s, and in the pistol categories, there are a great many of them. But for the Americans, there were 2 basic styles that were very popular. Your revolver, usually 38 caliber, and your 45 single stack semi-automatic pistol, usually based on a Colt 1911. Now, there are a lot of others, and if my buddy John were here, he'd be going nuts because he's a firearms aficionado. But for the purpose of our conversation, we can focus on these things. And you can think in terms of the popularity of the large 9 millimeters and the large 45s, again, autoloaders. But when people had started carrying them, and even into the earlier to the 1800s, when you had people out west, you think of the large cowboy action Colt peacemakers, but people who were more civilized, people who didn't want to carry that much weight and carried it everywhere, wanted to be more discreet, would carry smaller weapons, little 32 revolvers, little Derringer revolvers. Well, the same concept happened with the day-to-day carry of swords. The civilian day-to-day carry swords got lighter and smaller. They became more nimble, and a lot of people found it much more pleasant and easier to carry them around, because when you walk with a sword, everywhere you go, they very much become a pain in the derriere. Those of us who've done medieval reenactments, those of us who have spent time doing long-term programs for schools, it's something that I discuss frequently, but very few people like to put together, is the act of carrying a weapon indoors or in tight areas. And remember, much of Europe especially was built, the cities were built with relatively narrow roads deliberately to impede the ability of an invading army to bring troops through en masse. That meant odd angle streets. That meant small buildings. Because we were heating things and all the crafting was done by hand, many of the structures were much smaller than people expect. Now that means navigating them with a sword on your hip could be challenging and a pain. A small sword is both lighter, it is shorter, and again, it is much easier to physically learn to handle because you don't have as much weight to develop. A side sword, again, runs parallel, because this is a great question. A side sword, again, runs parallel to the rapier, but it is a more cutting weapon. So usually they were a bit shorter, sometimes quite a bit shorter and much wider, and again, ironically, very much civilian arms. Just like there are firearms laws today that say you can, you in America, you can't have a rifle that is too short without having to pay a special tax license for it. You can't have a shotgun that's too short. You can't have things that would be concealable. Well, in the sword days, the larger swords were considered weapons of war. And they didn't want people to have them on the street, especially civilians. So a lot of times civilians, depending on the country and time period, weren't allowed swords at all, and they had to look at the definition of a sword, which gets interesting, or they weren't allowed swords over a certain length. Side swords come in a lot into this period. They function much like arming swords, but usually have more elaborate hilts. Ironically, and again, I'm digging through my gear trying to find my assorted equipment. Do I have it yet? I know it got moved for safety. I just can't remember where. And it's driving me nuts. Let's see, that's a sword cane. That is basically an arming sword. Hell, this is between an arming sword and a side sword. So a complex little sword I got when I was awarded my lordship in the Society for Creative Anachronism. It was given to me, shockingly, by my wife, and is one of my favorite swords ever, in part because of its length. Now, this is a true edged weapon. This is a very sharp, because this is the sword I carried on my hip in the SCA. You'll note the length, however, is relatively short, because I had to carry it through doors. It was worn in this sheath. Oh, I'm sorry. The Society for Creative Anachronism is a medieval recreation group, an international medieval recreation group that does teach fencing and other sword fighting, heavy fighting. They do pleasant recreations of the pleasant recreations of the Middle Ages. Now, my interests lie just a bit outside of the period of the society. I also had some very unpleasant issues with the local society. So I spent 12 years as a fighter and an instructor basically the entire time in the Society for Creative Anachronism. I spent 6 years of that? Was it 6? Attempting to get the signatures for my marshalate. And when I got them, due to some lies spread about me, they voided it and accused me of a few things that were quite unpleasant. And at the same time accused me of holding quote-unquote illegal practices because I was working with a group, with other groups, helping them learn to sword fight. And the society the local members decided that if I was indeed teaching people, I can't teach them outside the society, and they didn't want me running practices in the society because I was teaching new people how to beat established people very rapidly, and it upset a great many people. So I left, and I tried to stay on as a merchant, and they were harassing me. And as part of that, not only I left, but my wife, obviously, but more unexpectedly, my dear friend Trelana also left the society, and Joey with us, and left the day we did because she saw what was going on. Sorry, that's an abbreviated version. I will give the full to anyone who wants to know offline, because I prefer to believe that my experiences were not the norm in that group. In that, from what I've heard, other groups nationwide and worldwide are much nicer than the groups I was involved with. So I don't hold others to it. Yes, it's something of a tongue-in-cheek. The society was originally founded by a group of authors, actually, including Mercedes Lackey, who in Berkeley, California, decided to have a medieval-themed party. And they had so much fun, they decided to do it next weekend, and then the weekend after that. And they did it so often that to get rooms, you have to name your group. Now, you take authors, college kids, who have a large vocabulary and are tongue-in-cheek, and you get the Society for Creative Anachronism. And yes, Ruby, isn't anachronism something that is non-historical, like firearms in the Middle Ages? Yes. The anachronism there is mostly doing medieval things in our time, would be the major anachronistic aspect of it. And as Lovingly would say, all the fun and none of the plague, theoretically. Most of my issues came from what they don't want to admit is the LARP aspect of it. That being said, I am totally content in doing what I do, how I do it. I get to teach people. I get to travel around when I am able to. I get to lose my rotary punch that I swear I left here. But I had help in my study that was well-meaning but not asked for. So some of my things aren't where they're supposed to be. This is, of course, most problematic, because I need my hole punch to punch the holes to show you how to do these things. And they should have been right here. Oh well. We will galvant on. Yep, I'm about to check under my keyboard. Let me see. Magic cards. Oh, a bunch of the notes from the original Wall of Knowledge. Okay, well, not there, although I did find under there, basically, my cutter. Sorry, guys. This is what happens when I clean. I lose everything. So we'll figure that whole song and dance out. I may have to improvise. It won't be the first time. It is maddening, though. So, that being said, behind my art tablet, that's another good option. I'm looking at the pile of things alongside my computer that weren't here a couple days ago because a bunch of things got sent into my study. And if I can't find that, I might find alternatives like, excuse me, heavy armor grade leather. Anyway, continue with your questionings while I do that. Where we are, and I love getting to have days where I am this professional seeming. I do have my punches that I just got. So I can use these if need be. And I found my actual brand new rivet setting tool and the leather. So I have that. I would prefer again to use the little punches for sewing, but that's okay. We adapt, overcome, improvise, and then yell at ourselves for making a big mess. It is how the system... Found it. Now, praying that my needles are where they're supposed to be, I may be able to do some leather working. We'll get it sorted out. And behind my art tablet is actually nothing. I cleaned it out and it stayed clean. See, growth. Now, back to the side sword. Believe it or not, the weapon I am talking about, which I will bring back here, was very close to being essentially a side sword. That's why it's so hard to find this particular typology, because the blade, this is based on a 1783 Charles IV, I believe. Charles IV, Spanish colonial cavalry broadsword. And the difference between a side sword and a broadsword is the broadsword is usually very wide at the beginning. Think of the Cincadea, the five-finger base short swords that were, again, weapons of self-defense. Okay, Nick, random question. That green bit of leather, which I just... Well, there's my needles. That was a magic trick. My green bit of leather. Ta-da! Okay, hold on. This? Do you have any plans for it, and how large is it? I have several green bits of leather in here. They are all fairly light gauge. They are all sueded. And they are all... Okay, that one's a little weird. See, I have some of the shader pieces, little guys like this, but about this big. Of course, my ruler is gone, and I know better than to hunt for that. I've been way too lucky in my reacquisition of goods. But why do you ask? And So you could use a rapier, small sword, and side. You can. Now, each of these have more dedicated approaches to them because this is the period where you start finding different blades on different styles of hilt. It was very much leading into the late 1700s, early 1800s was very much a transitional time. Unfortunately, it was a militarily active time as well. So you have a lot of people pushing over to the saber because the saber is simpler to learn. You can learn a saber relatively quickly. And by learning a saber relatively quickly, it was about mass producing not just the weapon, but the techniques for using it. Now we're getting into the Napoleonic era, and it gets really interesting when you realize the parallel timelines in different places of the world mean that you could have, over the age of a single generation, a cowboy, an aging pirate from the Caribbean golden age of the pirates. When I say pirates to a Western person, you get what I'm saying. And a samurai, all knowing each other. Ironically, they also all could have sent a fax, theoretically, to Abraham Lincoln because the fax machine was actually in existence. History, when you start looking at it beyond regional or regional or single major event timelines, so country-wise, you start realizing just how much of history is happening at the same time. It's just different countries have different names for the period. So you have the different Chinese dynasties. You have the different Japanese eras. It gets very fascinating very quickly. And a lot of it requires me to be able to pull out specific dates in specific locations, which is not how my brain works. I think in terms, usually, of the connectivity. So there are options. Now, I will tell you, because it will keep going on, all these people interacted. You have actually a heavy Dutch influence on the Japanese, for example. So you're going to find weapons that of this period that actually get influenced by each other. It really is fascinating. The rather complex history of the Chinese and the Japanese gets very interesting as well. However, we have to keep all of that parallel. The neat thing is, and it really is the core of why I wrote my book. Yeah, hey ogre. Is if you start looking at the different styles, and I mean really looking, you start to notice the vast majority agree on things. And when you look at that perspective on what do they agree on, and the fact that human musculature is essentially limited for most people, there will always be exemplary people who have different proportions that allow them more reach or giantism or things like that. For the most part, the vast majority of humans' elbow joints all work the same way. So we all ended up culturally developing, and it's a very uniform thing. Even in cultures that don't have metal, they end up taking sharpened stones and bedding them in wooden paddles and making essentially a sword out of that without having had exposure to what we think of as a sword. Humans get really good at realizing if I have between 2 and 3 feet of metal in my hand that I can make sharp, I can do harm onto others rather effectively. And that's a huge part of understanding, is looking from the perspective of the similarities. Because every manual out there, every person who sits down, and really the point in many ways of doing a manual. Okay. Please stay safe, Ogre. Swords of skipping briefly ahead. I've seen swords made of shark's teeth. Indeed. But people move the same. So I look at that for the similarities. Just about every manual is looking for the key difference that will give you the advantage with a specific weapon. I basically break weapons down into 5 types. Okay? Short knives, long knives to swords, two-handed, let's see, knives, swords, a one-handed sword, two-handed, 2-meter stick. 2-meter stick may be a spear on the end. It may be a two-handed sword. But when it boils down, you have a 1-meter stick, a 2-meter stick, a tiny weapon, a mass weapon, that's axes, hammers, a chunk of rock on the bottom, a chunk of cement on the bottom of a street sign pole. I've seen some hinky things in this. And then miscellaneous thorn weapons. You can boil these all down, and whereas other people be like, you need to use this stance, and they'll tell you why they believe that this stance is better than, say, that stance. And when you're reading the manuals, friends, read historical manuals. If you can take the time to get them translated, translate them yourself, or relax into the differences in spelling and phrasing, you will find they are some of the saltiest, most delightfully offensive books you'll ever read. Even though I have some profound disagreements with George Silver, I have a lot of agreements with George Silver too, don't get me wrong. But you have to read, at some point, George Silver's Paradoxes of Defense, simply for his opening, where he hates on rapiers. Oops, sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. I got distracted a bit because this is my favorite topic. And I got, like I said, I got the leather out of that whole bag. Was a $16 bag I bought with the money you guys are generous enough to donate to the guild, so that I could make. Again, I want to make sheaths. I want to make sheaths. I want to make frogs. I want to make pouches. There are several leather products that have nothing to do with armor, but are very valid. I also want to make armor, but this is not armoring leather. This is the goods leather while I get used to it. Now, I will tell you that I managed to pop/minorly dislocate both my elbows in a fairly recent time. We'll say earlier this week. Loud enough and painful enough, I know it was rather unpleasant. It was bad. But, and see, it's interesting when we get into your question, and it is great to hear Ogre, and it's great to know Ogre's driving around safe and sound. He says one of my favorite things is to use weapons in ways that people don't expect. So, Ruby, in my opinion, you can use any sword in any style. Now we're getting somewhere. It's more important that you learn a style that works with you than you worry about the weapon. Because my attitude is, I can pick up here we go. I can pick up a very old design of a Mora survival knife. Now, I have about 3 ways, basically, I can make this very real knife go. Remember, I am a professional. Okay? I can fight it like a dagger. I can fight it shanky knife style. And I could fight it reverse grip to do shady, karambity silliness, depending on where I am and how I'm doing things. I traditionally tend to go for a sort of hybrid grip, because my thumb will often pop back here and then fit to the side. But because this has a very nice hand guard, I can lock in like this, and I have a lot of muscle memory from fencing to keep this in line. Now, how I am moving with this is exactly how I would move if it were 3 feet long. Like I said, there is a very specific sword I put aside, and I need to unhide. I hit it too well so that I can cover using it. That's okay. And my stuff is falling back into my toolbox because it's getting jealous. That is okay too. I found a great many of the things I'm looking for, and even if I don't do leatherworking again, tonight or Sunday, I will sit down and do leatherworking. I have plans for Saturday that don't involve swords and things. To answer the incredible Grant Lankard. I'm sorry, I thought you were waving a knife at me. I forgot you're in the computer. First off, even if I were waving it at you, we would be well outside what's called the circle of blood, which I think of all the knife handling and tool knife handling manuals I've ever read, the Boy Scout manual's definition of how to handle a knife safely may be the most hardcore, because this is the circle of blood. Oh, it's Because remember, for me, any knife is a tool first. Could it be a weapon? Yes. Is it a tool first? Yes. That's why, even though I am a devout knife guy, even though I have a devout sword guy, even though I have a vast number of knives that I could carry, I like to carry my CRKT neck knife. This was a custom, I say was, because it was meant to be a display model that was given to me by my lovely wife when I finally lost my first minimalist. And I was so devastated by not having it on me. She bought me this. The sword and sheath actually glow in the dark, which means as soon as the power goes out, I can see where my keys and effects are hanging. Today, I have more things on it than usual because I was using more things. But this is about the length of knife I usually carry. I used to carry a small lockback about this length. Actually, that was what really encouraged Sword Sage on YouTube to be one of my friends. They were talking about knives, and everybody was doing things. We were all unpackaging something at a SCA practice, and I pulled out this little tiny knife. And they all laugh because, they're pulling out K-bars, which I've got one of those laying around here somewhere too, and things like my Mora knife and much bigger, very expensive knives. And I pull out this little click, and it's just enough to do what I need. And he looked at me, he said, any man who does what you do and carries a knife like that knows something. Because you don't feel the need to carry anything bigger. And the vast majority of time, I don't. If I step into the woods with any intent, yeah, I want a work knife on me or better because I may have to process lumber. I prefer, though, as soon as we get near anything woodland or survival, actually to carry an axe of some sort, preferably something longer than a hatchet. What they call a boy's axe is one of my favorite. It's about a 2.5-pound blade on a short handle, which means you can carry it well, but it isn't overly cumbersome, both for somebody of my height, but and I'm sorry, I saw Grant ranking, and you're right, I did lose a little bit of hair off the side from the ponytail. It didn't get mounted even. But I can swing it in tighter quarters. And that's one thing people who get very compensation-y about swords. As soon as you start training swords in any style, especially as a woman, if you are of a shorter height, there is both a temptation to go with a longer blade, and there is a push by some people, especially in more combative groups, that the poof is why I got the rating. Okay, well, if it's this one, I almost always lose this battle. But too many people want to prove their masculinity and toughness by being intimidating, carrying a huge sword. The other thing, you will see a lot of people talk about back carrying and back draws because they look cool. Till you do it combatively. Or you have to carry one in the rain. When you see people depicted wearing a sword on the back, it isn't usually the person who's a fighter. It's usually one of the support crew. Because please remember, military swordsmanship and principles is very different than the defense-minded civilian principles. As is in part but parallel, training as an individual versus training as someone who is fighting in a small unit or someone who is doing large-scale line combat. These are all very different disciplines because you have different limitations on what you can do. When people are talking about training soldiers in military styles, for example, you get things like the 7-point style that the Chinese military used for a long time. And I mean, I can't remember how long. I want to say it was a couple hundred years. I think they've advanced it, but it was a style that basically is built around 7 movements or 5-point style. Yeah, there's 5 and 7. I look at a lot of these things, guys. Back in the areas of VCDs, the idea is to take somebody who is a civilian, teach them how to fight as quickly, as effectively, as brutally, and as compatible with a lot of other people around you as possible, to arm them with the least expensive gear you can that accomplishes the job. This is grunt on up military. Now, for a long time, officers, and to this day, officers are usually pulled from a school that teaches them very, very early usually longer, much more complex concepts, tactical and strategic mindedness, resource management, a lot of things that your I say this not as a derogatory term, but as a term my father used to describe himself, the grunts, the gropos, if you will. And they tended to learn a few very different styles. The officers, many of the officers in Europe came from the aristocratic class, where one bought one's commission. They bought the position in the military of, I will pay this much because I would like to start as a lieutenant. So kind of pay to play, a free to play to win. This is where it gets different, because the people who bought their commissions were trained in their families in fencing with foils, whereas your grunts came up to here is a saber, make the saber go. Very large muscle exercises, very simple, easy to replicate, quick to learn. Sabers are simple weapons, and I adore them. I actually, my first European sword I trained in was very briefly saber. Now, I have been challenged to attempt to learn modern foil, and as soon as I can go to a physical therapist and check out this whole issue with my shoulders being how they are, my elbows being how they are, wrists and everything, I will see what I can do. But it does get kind of interesting. So back to our aristocrats. The aristocrats trained with a saber, with a foil, which meant light, persist, thrusting styles that did not fit the saber. That got us the spadroon, which was somebody's attempt at balancing out. And the irony is, if you look at more and more modern swords as they evolved, they went from hacking weapons back to thrusting weapons. They became more ceremonial, and they become much more looking like what you would consider a small sword. An interesting bit is only officers in the Marines are allowed to carry swords. Everyone else is allowed to carry knives. This is interesting because there are regions in the world where they are trained in what's called a bolo knife. Yes, a spadroon is something that looks like if you took a saber on one side, okay, so a wide-bladed, heavy cutting sword, and a rapier on the other, or a small sword, and you wanted to meld them together and get a sword that did everything, you would get a spadroon. They're very, very divisive weapons. It's like one of the middle evolutions of a small sword. Basically, is a rapier at the bottom for the forte, and then it narrows down to be what you would think of a small sword blade to give you better defense. Fascinating period. Spadroon's kind of like that. They tried to make them something a foilist could use in the field, because theoretically an officer wouldn't be using them. They shouldn't be sword fighting nearly as much as the grunts in the field. It gets interesting. And I will always encourage you, Google is your best friend. See, earlier, because types of metal got mentioned, and I honestly don't know if you were talking about metal music, because we referenced Circle of Blood making a great doom metal band music, or the metals that swords are made of. What, for the purpose of, whoops. Oh, yes, Mad Jack Churchill. Great fun. World War II. The man stormed the beaches, I want to say, of Normandy with a great sword on his back, a longbow, and bagpipes, because he was Scottish and proceeded to Scottish his way through. Brilliant, brilliant story. But history is fun. When you start looking at history without the contrivances of people trying to spin what they're telling you, and you just look at events, you find amazing things. Hello, Ogre. I'm glad you're parked and safe. But we talked quite a bit about sizing. Yes, bagpipes. There are a couple really great videos on YouTube about Mad Jack Churchill. Now, God, I really have to find where a couple of these weapons got put, because they're all my favorites, and it's making me think that I need to put these someplace safe, which is quite dangerous. Well, a saber is not far from a cutlass, and I have a cutlass. Oh, you may have been watching this. I stream to the Historical Fencing Guild. I stream parallel to the Independent Creator Directory YouTube channel, and I stream parallel to the Independent Creator Directory Twitch. But, one moment. I'm sorry, I am moving my things around, which means I cannot find the things that I am moving around for a bit. It will be rectified. I am in the process. But till then, I have my slightly damaged cutlass. Now, sabers are quite like this if you made it about that much longer, and it may or may not have a curve. They usually have a knuckle bow. They don't usually have this big guard. I will also encourage you, this was a gift, thank heaven. It fell off the wall, and the brass actually shattered. So it's actually a little dubious. It's why I don't carry it very much. But this was very popular in naval settings because, again, it's simply a stunted saber for a lot of purposes, which means it could be wielded in the narrow hallways inside a ship below decks. It's almost like if you are going to deal with entangling terrain, you need to have a weapon that you can actually swing in said terrain. Oh well. Once again, my weapons will show up when they show up, as they show up. And I just have to assume that they're like cats. They will show up when they want to, and I can't rush a thing. Oh, I'm sorry that your saber is in worse shape than my cutlass. It was a tragedy. I actually had it hung up on the wall, and the 2x4 split it was screwed to, so it fell down dramatically and was a whole situation. But yes, I do love swords. I love talking about them. If you were talking about the metal in swords, Ruby. Oh yes, Someplace safe is absolutely a dangerous subdimension. You see, if one could, oh, thank you for referring to me as an 8. It really is quite good for my ego. I have not gotten a lot of praise on such things. But if you have metal, oh, thank you. And if I could find it in this disaster, I will show you my first sword. But I truly believe that in the event that I was allowed access to things that needed to be forever destroyed, if I could convince myself I'd have to truly want to have access to it, I could put them someplace safe and they'd never be found again. It's just such a thing. And yes, cats, they come and go as they please. One always leads to many. Yes. And I want more. I am currently lusting after a very specific sword. And I've been after it for a very long time. I will bring it back up. But before I lose track, if you look up OSA 18 or UENEXEEXEER, I'm sorry, you can see. He posted it on our swords 5 days ago. This absolute gorgeous weapon. Now, the historical versions of this weapon had a wider blade, so it was very much a short sword. Short broadsword, actually. But for me, it's the rigging and the balance. I also don't like overly long swords for the reasons I have discussed earlier and my ability to draw them quickly. It's why, though I am more versed in katana than I prefer to admit and would like to be again, I found I quite liked carrying a wakizashi a bit more, but I also tend to dual wield, and that gets into a whole nother universe. Your first sword might get banned in YouTube. Well, Grant, you know how to where my email is too. If you say, Nick, this is a picture of my sword, and you're not being inappropriate, I think it would be. I love hearing about people's first swords. I love hearing about weapons. I want to forge again. I have made some simple knives, but I made them as gifts or as prototypes. I have ones put away. That was very much a work knife. I'm almost 1,000% sure that Thesis is poking fun at Grant, and I completely agree with that. But a lot of people ask me, what's your sword of choice? And it would have to be Spanish. Oops. Spanish. Aha. This is the historical piece version of the sword I'm talking about, and I will bring that up hopefully right now. This is my baby. This Charles III. See, I always get the Charles wrong. Charles III, 34-inch blade. Polish swords for Witcher fans. Basically, the other one is a Polish maker. He makes some beautiful other swords that are a little more your bread and butter, Ogre. But this is from a antique sword deal that, long since came and went. But when I say, what size are you? For Christmas, I fit a 1783 Spanish cavalry broadsword. I love this style of weapon. The only thing is I tend to like the smaller hilted ones. And yes, it is a scene from the Musketeer movies. Scene where the Musketeers sneak into the king's residence and D'Artagnan gets asked about his sword by one of the lady guests. I recall that. I'm trying to lob over the shenanigans. But this is a very distinctive guard, and I have one of a, actually I have two, of a wall hanger class like this. I would like one in a fencing grade class like this. So with a foil or a practical rapier. And as you can see, I mean, the hand protection is superb. It has enough quillion to do the job, but not tangle. This, to me, right here, is probably the most beautiful, most functional design of swords. I would love one that was mirrored right hand. There's some interesting sword strokes in Yellowbeard as well. There should be. Part of the fun is the sword strokes. Nick, you're over an hour. You need to eat. I actually have prepped and have been setting up Snickers bar situations to keep me going. And I ate extra dinner to be sure because I knew I would need time with this. Because I said I wasn't sure I would be doing leatherworking or not. But we've got such great questions that I don't mind answering them and talking about it because this is fascinating. For metals, you want a sword that has flex. That can flex and then recover from the flex. The sword testers that... it's not Remington swords. Shoot. Maybe it is. The Razor guys. It starts with an R. Oh, no, I appreciate you guys checking on me. And I am not hydrated enough for where I'm in the stream, so thank you. I'm also looking a little extra red in the face. Please ignore the red burns. I have a skin condition that when I am stressed, I get basically huge burning welts on my face and other places. And in recent weeks, I have been at what we'd call peak stress. Now, I love that I'm getting questions that I can answer and I can debate and we can bring things up like this. I also will note that many times I'll say, I like this sword. And people will say, well, what if you're going about this? Well, then I would probably switch. It's the whole, people will ask, what's your favorite day-to-day carry weapon? And, I would say, my neck knife. If you want to count that as a weapon. I don't actually. Well, that's interesting. I'm sorry, I just had a Nerf blaster decide that a piece had to fall off on its own and go Lord knows where. I love this blaster. It's one of my favorites. But it has been slowly disassembling itself. Okay. That means I'm going to spend some money. That's okay. Not on another one. No, I'm just going to get the parts and request Joey to run me off a couple more until I can get my 3D printer working. Anyway, I love talking about this. I love, like I said, I said I would probably have to do a standalone pre-recorded video, but I had some needs as a parent that have taken most of my time, which is how it should be. My son comes first. It is an old style, and it is not always the most popular set of beliefs, but that does not impede the fact that that's what I believe. Uh, which is why I will be ending the stream fairly shortly. It's been chaotic, but we are going. And peak chronic stress, you're not alone. Great for looking out for Nichols, guys. Thank you, guys. I really do appreciate that you care, and that I will indeed be calling it, because you're right. I do need to eat something a bit more than what I have, and I do need to take care of a few other things tonight. Because I have plans tomorrow that will require me to plan in advance. Okay, and my stomach now just growled at me. So, I hope you were entertained. This was a very meandering stream, and I'm apologetic for that. Also, sorry for the late start. That one was technical issue, so I don't need to feel too bad. But we will be getting a lot more content. Like I said, I have streams to do. I need to go. 1 second. I set up for a week. This is important. Before I go, I need to go to my trainers or tools. I set up a poll on the Historical Fencing Guild's Patreon about the 4 things I intend to purchase in the near future. Now, that poll ends next week, but we can take a quick look to see if anybody's responded. I have not checked yet, so let me get there, and I will bring up the what people think I should look at. So, this is the poll, and thus far, people think I should buy the dagger trainer first and hold off on the other purchases. One person thinks I should buy the PHA pointer, which is a trainer I actually requested several years ago, and he was able to put together. 4 people now want me to get the throatless shear, which is a sheet metal cutting tool for armor making. And one of you want me to get the charcoal. Oh, here, 3. I'm sorry, it was reading my things as I click. One of you want me to get the charcoal mini forge to make knives and riggings. So, let me do, copy. At least I think, here we go, share. We'll just do it this way. Copy post link. I'm going to put it on here, and thank you for answering that thesis. And yeah, I shouldn't need, I'm going to put the whole thing just so it's known. This should give you the link for that poll. Right now, what I do is I take the money I earn from my books, and I take the money that I earn from the Historical Fencing Guild Patreon. I try to save it up for purchase review or good service type things, or I have to deal with that or somebody has a need. That happens. But it also covers my business side of things. So when I have to make a special order for the conventioning, because that's how I earn my big bonus money to buy what I want that's outside of our purchases for, again, usually the Historical Fencing Guild, it's all cyclic. My YouTube channels let me earn through, again, the Fencing Guild, a little income that I can either save up to do big purchases, save up to do thank you, Ogre. It was great seeing you. Please come by more often. Smaller for purchases. The thing is, what happens is I will buy trainers and then I will donate them. Oftentimes to people who, well, this is perfect for me. Good, go. Or I can't afford armor. I need this. If it's a group I can make things for, maybe a gorget happens. I am still shocked that went boink, but we'll deal with it. So that's, but I want to be at least open about what I'm doing so that you guys know I'm not just taking the money and, effing off with it. So, yeah. I have one vote for the forge. Now, I have done forging over campfires. I've done forging on other people's forges. I've done forging with Neil Cafferty. No, I haven't. That was a joke. But a couple of trainers could be good as well. We'll see. And hopefully by the time we hit the end of this poll, I may have one of my additional paychecks so I can afford to do one of these things. Now, if there is interest and you guys want to support me that way, I can try to set up the whole wish list thing. I'm not sure about that. I would also really like to be able to get a P.O. box if if my funds can sustain the cost, so that hopefully I can get companies to send me products to review. Because if you send me something to review, I will definitely see about making it. Now, this has been delightful. Please, there are 6 days left. If you haven't chimed in, please chime in so that I can try to make the orders. It will be weeks to months before I get everything, and the weather is appropriate for me to do the outdoorsy stuff to use it. But I want your input, so thank you. Outside of that, guys, I think it's a good time for me to actually take your advice. I can feel the shine coming on. It tells me I have pushed it a little farther than I should. So, guys, thank you. Seriously. The answers probably need to come from those who are Patreon members or something, since the funds are coming through there as well as your own. I've spoken many times with my Patreon members, and the vast majority of time they do not want exclusives. They understand that what I do is to put out free information to lower the bar to entry and basically build a ramp where other people build gates towards basic sword education, so that you can then go out and find the education you want, either from organizations or you figure out how you want to fight, which manuals to look into. The other thing is a mild call out to our dear friend Thesis. I've already spoken intensely with Trelena about it, and I will continue to do so. And actually, a little bit of love to Kitty on this one, too. We are entering a period, before I end the stream, where there is going to be a lot of generated content, AI-generated stuff. There's a lot of suppression of information, both martial and medieval and practical. things can be rewritten, deep faked and changed. This is why, as a swordsman, as a sword master, a title given to me, a guild master running the Scoofy Show, and a former librarian, I am passionate about the need for published hard copies. If you have a skill set that is beyond the average person in anything, please take the time to start writing down notes about how it's done. And then I encourage you to publish it. I currently publish through the Kindle Direct Publishing program through Amazon because they're the biggest guy in the game. You could also publish through companies like Lulu.com. For me, Amazon has much cheaper author prices on the books. So while I may not make a lot of books on a lot of money on my monthly sales, that is offset by if I can do a convention and sell some books there, or art, or anything like that. But please, thesis especially, I suspect, Kitty, if you've trained in swords, please write about what you've learned. I would love to see Cindy write a book on just pursuing martial arts as someone with physical limitations and as someone who is older. I think there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of quality there. So please do that. Please write your books. I answered. Oh, you're referring to that. I'm sorry. Great show. Love that info. Manuals sure to be getting while they're over. Well, getting well over there to use. Absolutely, absolutely, Sarah. And talk to me. I understand your financial situation. Oh, there is no. This is not a published this year necessarily. I'm not saying it needs to be yes, there are a trade load of books about Tai Chi. But in your case, Cindy, and I guess I'm going to go a little longer. I'm okay with this because this is important. In your case, it's not so much the perspective of technique recorded, but the perspective of doing it as a woman, doing it as somebody with physical limitations, people with conditions. Because there are a lot of people who say, oh, you have this. That means you can't do this. And the adaptation that people make is always beautiful, it's impressive, and it's inspiring. And I'm a firm believer, if you write something that helps one person who might not have been helped otherwise, you have made a tremendous addition to the world. Because if everybody who had skills or a knack or something they were really good at or really passionate about, hopefully both, wrote down and disseminated, preferably at a low cost, because I only make literally a couple bucks on any of my books by choice. I don't inflate my prices to have a high profit margin. I'm writing these largely in service. Now, I do need money because that's my legacy for my son. In that I'm hoping to make sure the royalties can go to him in the event of my eventual passing. The not much but better than nothing is not much but better than nothing. And I want to go beyond that. So if you have the means to help people, you always should. And in this time of confusion and division, using your expertise to elevate the lives of others right now is crucial. Sorry if this sounds a little more, never mind the furthermore, than Historical Fencing Guild. That would be my other channel for the people who don't know. I do a 3-day-a-week scheduled live stream, usually between 1 and 3 hours, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Wednesday is customarily an art stream. I do art drawings and paintings, and we discuss digitally online, sort of a very, very sarcastic, goofy Bob Ross. I scheduled this show. I have Nick Knows Nerf, my Nerf Blaster review show coming down the pipe. I did a bunch of those. I had to take some time off. I'll be doing more of those. All over at the @Nicholas Tucker channel. The same chat, same on YouTube, just like the Historical Fencing Guild is on YouTube. Please subscribe to both. I keep the Historical Fencing Guild separate because I tend to discuss sharp, shiny things that can affect monetization, and it can affect my algorithms. And in the event they wanted to close one down, I wanted to back up. I hope that seems rather clear to you guys why I would do that. But with that, guys, I've gone almost an hour and a half. Good. Please keep hounding Thesis to write his manual, especially. Rest assured, I send the same messages to Sword Sage. I send them to all sorts of people. Kitty, you're a good woman. Foxy's too. All the ladies here are very, very good women. But hounding him for his benefit, I have to approve of. But guys, keep your guard up. Do your drills. Be kind to yourself and each other. And as always, thank you for supporting your local Swordmaster. I will be back next week at 8 o'clock on Friday night to stream more of Swords and Shenanigans to you at the Historical Fencing Guild's live stream. I love you, and you should too.